Aisha Oyebode is the CEO of the Murtala Muhammed Foundation, a non-governmental organization devoted to socio-economic change in Nigeria. Aisha is an amazing woman. She trained as a lawyer. She has a master's in public international law in the areas of armed conflict and the use of force. She's a member of the Nigerian Bar Association. She has an MBA in finance, and she's a development specialist. So with no further ado, your foundation, it works on so many different things, but one of the things is disaster risk management. So I'm just wondering what motivated you to start work in this area?
Okay, let me just say quickly, I know I have, we don't have a lot of time, but I really must say I'm humbled by the quality of women that are here, and I'm also pleased because I'm actually seeing scientists, practitioners, people who are working to solve the problems that a lot of our women, that I work with face. So thank you very much, all of you. We started the foundation in 2001, and this was just, and we had what I would call a baptism of fire, because in 2002, the Ikeja cantonment, which is the military barracks in Ikeja, which was actually in the middle of the city, although at the time it was put there, was meant to be on the outskirts, exploded because they had bombs that had not been kept properly, and you can imagine what it must have been like in the city of Lagos. We had a traumatic 10 to 12 hours of not knowing exactly what was going on. But what was even worse was that the people who lived around there, because there was so much fire and so on, started running, and they all ran in the direction of a canal. Most people didn't know there was a canal there because it was covered by water hyacinth, and at least 1,000 people drowned. So it was really awful. Now, so, disaster response was an area in which we were working on. But then we then started thinking about even disaster risk management. The reason being that there was a woman who told us her story. She had gone out early in the morning to the market to, fend for her family. And while she was away, this had happened. When she got back, where are her children, where are her children? Everybody was like, go in the direction of the canal, because that's where everybody has gone to. So she went in the direction of the canal. She looked around, and they were bringing out bodies, and she said, well, she didn't see her children. And as she was walking away, somebody said, they've just brought your first child out. As she turned around, they brought the second one out, and the third one. Now, as if that's not bad enough, she lost all her 3 children. Then her husband's family now ostracized her. They said she had brought bad luck to the family, and she was a witch. So you need to understand what we're talking about now. We're talking about building resilience. We're talking about, our women have to be able to be economically empowered, such that even when disasters happen, they're able to deal with them. So this is, how we got into that area.
That's interesting, because there, of course, have been a number of disasters, and you're working very much on disaster risk management in northeast Nigeria, where unfortunately we know that Boko Haram are active. But it's not just northeast Nigeria, is it? Because that is a humanitarian crisis that spread to the whole of the Lake Chad region. We heard in the former panel about the stresses on the environment there with the depletion of water in Lake Chad. So there's really a link between conflict and environmental issues.
Yes, definitely, because you see, we've had poor response to the climate shift, and as a result, there's been shortages, and so millions of livelihoods. It was mentioned earlier that 30 million people actually their livelihood depends on the Lake Chad, and about 9 million people actually live within the periphery of that lake. So you can imagine what we're talking about. So there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of tension, and of course, over food security, and then Boko Haram has made it its, what's the word?
It's a recruiting ground.
Yes, it's a recruiting ground for a lot of the young the army of soldiers that are now part of Boko Haram because of the poverty that has resulted as a result of loss of livelihoods. Yes.
disaffected young men and boys. I think that resonates with all of us, wherever society we are, with the threat of terrorism. Now, I know that one of the things that your foundation is doing, you were talking about building resilience in communities, and of course, many of the women have been affected by Boko Haram, whether they've been uprooted, displaced from their homes, or actually abused. And you've set up some trauma counseling centers, even in Borno State, where Boko Haram are active.
Yes, because one of the things we have understood from this conflict is that rape in war, and most people have found that out, has become one of the most extreme expressions of the domination of women. And that's what has happened with this conflict. I mean, they are doing the most unimaginable things to African women, to Nigerian women and girls. Even before the Chibok issue became, media worthy, you used to have situations where they would go into communities and they would decide that there were girls there that they wanted to take with them. They would then force those girls to go with them and throw the equivalent of 30 cents. That's the dowry. So in effect, what they have done is they've said they've paid for wives, and then they take those girls away with them. So those were the kind of things that have been happening, and we needed to work directly with the communities. So we started in Kano first, what we call the Crisis and Trauma Counseling Center. And basically it was to minister to the needs of those who had been, traumatized by the bombings and also the insurgency. And we found out that there were a huge number of rapes. I mean, rapes undocumented, a lot of women, and this is not even in the epicenter. When the conflict started to clear and the military now started to regain territory, we've now moved into Borno State, and we're looking at Yobe State, and it is unimaginable what is going on. Women have been raped, women are coming back with babies, and then they're being stigmatized by their communities because they're called Boko Haram wives. And then the new one that is even more worrying, and that's the reason why we keep talking about social protection, is a lot of young girls, I'm sure you've heard about it, are being used as suicide bombers. Now, we have several that the bombs don't detonate. So we have at least now 25 girls in the custody of the Nigerian military. In May, we had the painful job of having one of the girls identified. The bomb hadn't detonated, and she was held in the most unimaginable conditions. She had been beaten, black and blue, and then eventually, when they actually now sort of were getting ready to send her back to Nigeria because they found her in Cameroon, and they changed her and dressed her up. She was just a baby. This girl was 12 years old. Now, they had told her, said to her, we're going to strap these things around you. Go. When you come back, I mean, whoever comes back after a bomb has exploded. But that's how young and how unaware these girls are. So these are the kind of problems that we're dealing with. So it was very important to build, and we call them crisis and trauma counseling centers, not only because, not just because we counsel alone, but because we try and give as much, psychosocial support. We try and build their resilience. We try and match them with organizations that will help them, with whether it's livelihoods, all of these different things across the chain so that we can give, rehabilitate them.
And indeed encourage them to come to the centers because of the stigma of rape in any society, and to actually give them professional counseling.
Yes. In fact, one of the things we do is that the centers are very discreet. You won't know where our center is in Kano unless, you are told about it, because we really don't want these people to be stigmatized, and there is a lot of stigma out there.
You're perhaps most well known for being the co-convener of the Bring Back Our Girls movement. As many of you are aware, 2 years ago, April the 14th, 2014, 276 girls from the village of Chibok were abducted. I mean, was there anything that gave you a hint that such, an atrocity, if I may say, was going to take place there?
There were warning signs, but we just didn't see them. They had been killing teachers for quite a while. They had been burning schools. But we didn't think that this was going to happen. And then in February of that year, they had gone to a school in a neighboring state next to Borno State, and they had brutally murdered 59 young boys. I mean, it was brutal. Then they locked up all the girls and said to them, "We don't want you in school. Go home. Go home and get married." And we just thought, we heard about it, but I think we were still reeling from the shock of how those boys had been killed. And then the next thing we hear is that they're going to a school. This was a school that was a center for girls from the local and neighboring communities, 276 girls, and they went in there and they took all of those girls en masse. Some of them were girls who had just gotten married, which is, because in those communities, most of the girls get married either in January or September. This happened in April. So some of the girls had just gotten married. Some of them had finished school and had married, had children, and just come back to, for remedial studies. Some of them had children already. It was really awful, and it was very, very traumatic.
And perhaps one of the awful things was the slow response of the authorities.
Oh, yes. They kept denying it for several days, in fact. They told us no such thing had happened. And it's a very poor community. You need to understand Chibok, that whole community is a very, very poor community. One of the fathers said to me that, when our daughters were taking, I needed to get a recharge card. Now, the minimum most people know in Africa for recharge card is 300 naira. 300 naira today is less than $1. He had to go around his community trying to collect money so that he could buy one recharge card and call the authorities so that they would know what was going on. It took almost over 24 hours to get from where Chibok was to Sambisa Forest. Now, these girls so you can imagine how slowly they were going. Girls were jumping out of trucks. They were hanging onto trees. Those were the ones, the girls that managed to escape. And that's why we have 219 in captivity who were taken. When they got to Sambisa Forest, they were at the outskirts of Sambisa Forest for 3 days, and nobody responded, So you can imagine how challenging it was for the families and how challenging it has been for all of us as a nation, and even as a community, and even for women. How do we begin to explain to the next generation that under our watch, Boko Haram came in and took 276 girls and just drove away with them?
And as you say, there was a lot of outrage at the time about the slow response. It hit the headlines. And then, of course, it faded from view. But it faded from view, but you were still working with the families, with the Bring Back Our Girls campaign.
Yes, I was, because from the very beginning, one of the things I said when we were talking about outreach, initially the plan was, let's have a one-day out march. And I said, that doesn't work. We've done it time and time again. I remember, about 10, 15 years ago when a plane dropped from the skies, and it had, all of them were school children from a school, an elite school in Nigeria, and we had a day of outreach because we felt the government wasn't doing enough to protect our children. I said, no, we need to do more than a day of outreach. We need to take it city by city, and that was why, if you notice, we went from Abuja to Lagos to Kano, various cities, and then other parts of the world took it up. The other thing I said was, even if they're going to go on a rampage in Sambisa Forest, please, we want our girls back alive. And to a certain extent, maybe that's the reason why they've been quite cautious about trying to rescue the girls, because we've said we don't want, them bringing us dead bodies. We want our daughters back and alive.
And as you most probably heard, last month, one of them was brought back alive. I mean, how was that greeted in the community, and what does that now mean for your work with the community?
It was a bittersweet moment. It was sweet to the extent that at least now we have confirmation after 2 years that the girls are alive. That much we know. And a week before then, CNN had a proof of life video, which they broadcasted. I don't know how many people saw it, but they showed 15 girls who had been recorded in December last year. So we knew. And then also a lot of the Boko Haram cells, because they're breaking apart, are actually trying to negotiate. So different groups, including ours, have been approached by people who are trying to negotiate with the government. So we know that the girls have been separated to the different cells. So we were happy, at least that one of them was back alive. But that's one. So we have 218 girls still out there. Now, she's also confirmed to us that 6 of the girls have died, and some of them very gruesome circumstances, which,
and
I don't have to share.
You've written a book,
Yes.
which is going to come out next year, I believe. I'm getting a sign to stop, although I think that I'm just going to carry on for a few minutes, if I may, because I think we're all captivated by what Aisha is saying. And could you tell us why you're writing that book?
Because there are still many people, even after the initial government denials, who still tell us it didn't happen. And I'm like, but I know the mothers, I know the fathers. In the last 2 years, 19 of the parents have died. Just 2 weeks ago, I was told that one of the fathers had died. He had high blood pressure. I know the parents very well. And so how can we have this culture of denial? So we started gathering data on the parents, or both parents, mother and father, and the siblings as well. And we were trying, and then we started piecing together, actually, the stories about the girls themselves. And it was after that that I got a publisher, US publisher, approached me and said they would like to publish it into a book.
Yeah. Because indeed, we hope that the girls are released by next spring, but in fact, these girls have actually become a symbol of women's suffering in the area.
Yes, gender-based violence, it's a real issue with us. Even when Amina was found, one of the concerns that we had as activists was that she came back with a baby, and there were people who thought that was all right. Well, how can it be all right? This girl went as a schoolgirl. She must have been raped continuously, for this baby. Yes, we want Amina back, we want the baby back. We're talking about rape. But the problem is that people are also used to child marriage, which is an issue. It's something that we are trying to abolish. In my family, my father's family, I'm the first girl who was not married off at 12 or 13. All my father's sisters were married at 12 or 13. In fact, my father's younger sister had 5 marriages because she was so childish. The men kept sending her back home. And so at one point, she did an Al Jazeera interview recently, and she said, but I was a child. I mean, what do you think? A child is childish. So these are some of the issues that this chibok kidnap has focused a lot of our attention on. And the women, and Nigerian women, are now up in arms. We're tired. We're tired of gender-based violence. We're tired of our girls being used as tools. We're tired of sexual exploitation of our daughters. We've had it. We're done. We're tired.
And just to say that Aisha is also trying to empower the communities in Chibok, very poor farming subsistence communities. And indeed, there's a lot of expertise in this room about what could be done to improve their farming and make their livelihoods better while they wait for their daughters to return.
Yes.
Aisha, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much to Claire and Aisha. And Claire, you made a good call at taking those couple of extra minutes. I think we were all completely riveted and could have sat here for much longer to hear the story. So thank you very, very much.